A threat ignored. The Galactic Coalition's Grand Council chamber was abuzz with activity. Delegates from 100 species sat in their floating seats, suspended in a perfect circular arrangement. At the center, a massive hologram displayed the galaxy's known territories, with Earth, a tiny blue dot, highlighted in faint red. "This is the species we're discussing," scoffed High Commander Veltrax of the Krell Dominion, his voice a low growl. His scaled hand gestured dismissively at the hologram. "Humans. Primitive. Weak. Barely spacefaring." Around him, murmurs of agreement echoed through the chamber. Humanity had entered the galactic stage only a few decades ago. Their technology was nothing compared to the Coalition's centuries of advancement. To most of the Council, they were insignificant. Ambassador Sirin of the Altheran Collective, a species known for their keen foresight, raised a delicate hand. "They may be new to the stars, but reports suggest they are resourceful." Veltrax laughed, a harsh, guttural sound. Resourceful. They'd barely held their colony on Titan when the Terrians raided. Their ships are outmatched, their numbers few. What possible threat could they pose? Sirin hesitated but didn't argue. She had read the reports. Accounts of humans overcoming impossible odds, their adaptability unmatched. But she was alone in her concern. In a far corner of the galaxy, a small human colony ship drifted through the void, carrying families seeking a new home. Its crew, a mix of civilians and military personnel, remained vigilant. They knew the dangers of uncharted space, but they also carried hope. Hope was shattered when the Coalition scout fleet appeared. The attack was swift and brutal. Coalition ships, sleek and bristling with advanced weaponry, descended on the unarmed vessel. Human defenders scrambled to respond, but their weapons were outdated, their shields barely functional. Captain Elijah Ward, a seasoned officer, stood on the bridge of the Solace, his face grim. "Send a message to Earth," he ordered. "Tell them we're under attack." The communications officer turned to him, her expression pale. "Sir, they've jammed our signal." Ward clenched his fists. He knew what this meant. The Coalition wasn't here for diplomacy. "Evacuate the civilians to the escape pods," he said calmly, though his heart pounded, "and prepare for a fight." Hours later, the Solace was a lifeless husk, floating in the cold darkness. Coalition ships scanned the debris for survivors, but found none. Satisfied, they departed, leaving the shattered remains of the colony ship behind. What they didn't know was that a single escape pod had slipped through their sensors. Hidden among the wreckage, it carried a handful of survivors, including Captain Ward. They had seen everything, and they had recorded it all. The escape pod eventually reached Earth, and the footage of the attack was broadcast across human territories. The images of destroyed ships and innocent lives lost ignited a fury that spread like wildfire. In a hidden military base beneath the surface of Mars, Admiral Catherine Hale watched the footage with a clenched jaw. She turned to her staff, her voice cold and unwavering. "They think we're weak. They think they can attack us without consequence." Her chief strategist, a wiry man named Colonel Grant, nodded. "They underestimated us, Admiral. That was their first mistake." Hale's eyes burned with determination. "And it will be their last. Prepare the fleets. Send a message to the Coalition." Grant hesitated. What should the message say? Hale smiled, a grim, knowing smile. "Tell them, leave us alone or face the consequences." Back in the Coalition Council chamber, Veltrax laughed as the message was delivered. "Consequences. From humans." He looked around, his sharp teeth glinting. "They're delusional." The Council laughed with him, dismissing humanity's warning as bravado. Veltrax stood, addressing the assembly with confidence. "Let this be a lesson to them," he said. "They are nothing in the face of the Coalition. Their defiance is meaningless." Ambassador Sirin, seated quietly among the delegates, felt a pang of unease. She had heard similar arrogance before, from other species who had underestimated their enemies. and paid the price. As the council moved on to other matters, she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's warning was more than empty words. Meanwhile, deep in the asteroid belts of the solar system, human engineers and scientists worked tirelessly in secret. Forgotten during humanity's early wars, ancient weapons and ships were being restored. Plans for retaliation were laid with precision and care. In the shadows, humanity's wrath began to stir, a force that the Coalition could never have imagined. And so, the galaxy remained unaware that the greatest mistake it had ever made was treating humanity as a threat to be ignored. The silent retaliation. The Galactic Coalition had moved on. To them, the human warning was little more than noise, an idle threat from an insignificant species. Coalition fleets patrolled the outer systems, their commanders confident that the humans posed no real danger. But in the shadows, humanity prepared. Admiral Catherine Hale stood in the command center of Earth's most secretive facility, codenamed Black Horizon. The room was a hive of activity, with officers and engineers working around the clock. The air buzzed with tension, but Hale's voice was steady as she addressed her team. Phase 1 begins now, she said. No warnings. No negotiations. Let them feel the consequences. The officers nodded and set to work. Across the solar system, hidden stations powered up ancient defense grids. Massive stealth drones, cloaked in advanced electromagnetic fields, slipped quietly into Coalition territory. On the edge of Coalition space, a small outpost named Velar Station bustled with activity. It was an unremarkable hub, responsible for monitoring trade routes. The crew, a mix of alien species, relaxed in the control room, confident in their security. Anything interesting on the scanners? A Krell officer asked lazily, sipping a bright blue drink. Nothing but space dust, replied the technician, aboard Altheran. But then the lights flickered. The Krell officer frowned and straightened in his seat. What was that? Before anyone could respond, the outpost's systems went offline. The control room plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow of emergency lights. Alarms blared, but the crew couldn't locate the source of the problem. Outside, a human stealth drone floated silently. Its sleek design absorbed radar and light, rendering it invisible to the outpost's scanners. It deployed a series of precise electromagnetic pulses, disabling the station's defenses. Seconds later, the drone's payload was unleashed, a series of kinetic projectiles fired with pinpoint accuracy. The station's core erupted in flames, its structure collapsing in on itself. Within moments, Velar Station was reduced to rubble. No survivors. The destruction of Velar Station was only the beginning. Over the next several days, more Coalition outposts along the border began to go silent. At first, the Coalition leadership dismissed it as technical malfunctions or rogue pirate activity. But as the reports piled up, a pattern emerged. Every destroyed station wore the same haunting signature. Precision strikes, no survivors, and no evidence of the attacker, except for a single message scrawled on a fragment of debris. You were warned. In the Coalition Council chamber, panic was spreading. High Commander Veltrax, once so confident, now paced furiously as the reports were read aloud. 5 outposts in a week, shouted one delegate. This isn't random. Someone is targeting us. Veltrax slammed his fist on the table. It's pirates, or some rogue faction. The humans couldn't possibly. They warned us, interrupted Ambassador Saren. Her voice was calm but firm, cutting through the noise. And we ignored them. Veltrax glared at her. You're suggesting humans are responsible for this. Absurd. They don't have the capability. Saren met his gaze, unflinching. Do you know that for certain? Because I think we've underestimated them. The room fell silent. For the first time, doubt began to creep into the minds of the Council. Meanwhile, on a Coalition flagship patrolling the border, Captain Ryler received new orders. Investigate the destruction of the outposts and identify the culprit. His ship, the Halcyon, was a state-of-the-art vessel, equipped with the most advanced scanning and defense systems. Ryler was confident that no enemy could match its capabilities. "Bring us to the last known location of Veller Station," he ordered. As the Halcyon approached the debris field, Ryler and his crew were on high alert. Scanners swept the area, searching for any signs of hostile activity. "Captain," said his first officer, an Altheran named Lysera, "I'm detecting something. It's faint, but there's an energy signature nearby." Ryler frowned. "Can you identify it?" Lysera shook her head. "It's unlike anything in our database. It's moving." Before Ryler could respond, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared as explosions rocked the hull. "Report," Ryler shouted. Lysera's voice trembled. "We're under attack. Unknown vessels, multiple targets." On the main screen, several human stealth drones appeared, their cloaking fields briefly disrupted by their sudden movements. They were smaller than the Halcyon, but moved with terrifying precision. The Halcyon fired its weapons, but the drones evaded effortlessly. Their counterattacks were devastating, targeting the ship's engines and weapons systems with surgical accuracy. Within minutes, the once mighty Halcyon was crippled. As the drones prepared for a final strike, a single transmission came through the Halcyon's comm system. "This is only the beginning." The drones vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving the Halcyon adrift and powerless. Captain Ryler stared at the wreckage of his ship, his mind racing. This isn't possible," he whispered. But it was. Humanity had struck back, and the galaxy was beginning to understand why they were not to be underestimated. The unseen enemy. The Galactic Coalition fleet was on high alert. The sudden and unexplainable losses along the border had thrown the upper command into disarray. Orders came down swiftly. Reinforce patrols near the human territories and investigate the cause of the attacks. High Commander Veltrax personally oversaw the operation from his flagship, the Dominion's Pride, an enormous vessel bristling with the latest in Coalition technology. Veltrax was determined to crush this human rebellion before it escalated further. "They think they can challenge us," Veltrax growled as he stood on the bridge, his clawed hands gripping the railing. "We'll remind them of their place." His first officer, a cautious Altheran named Vale, approached with a tablet. "Sir, we've deployed 5 fleets to the border systems. All are awaiting your command." Veltrax smirked, his confidence unshaken. "Excellent. We'll sweep these pests from the galaxy." Far from the Coalition's bustling command centers, humanity was quietly moving its pieces into place. Admiral Catherine Hale stood in the war room of Black Horizon, surrounded by holographic displays of Coalition fleet movements. Each ship's trajectory and likely rendezvous point had been calculated with precision. "They've taken the bait," said Colonel Grant, pointing to one of the displays. "Veltrax is concentrating his forces in Sector Theta 5. He's leaving critical supply routes exposed." Hale nodded, "And that's where we strike." She turned to her fleet commanders. "Deploy the Spectre-class vessels. Keep them cloaked until the Coalition reaches their rally points. Once they're vulnerable, hit them hard and vanish before they can respond." The officers saluted, and the room buzzed with activity. Humanity's next move was set in motion. In Sector Theta 5, the Coalition fleet assembled. Dozens of ships, from sleek interceptors to massive carriers, moved into formation. Veltrax stood at the center of the Dominion's Pride's bridge, watching the holographic display with satisfaction. "They wouldn't dare face us head-on," he declared. "Humans are cowards." As if in response, the lights on the ship flickered briefly. Veltrax frowned. "What was that?" "Minor power fluctuation," Vale replied, though there was an edge of uncertainty in his voice. Moments later, the alarms blared. "Multiple signatures detected," shouted the tactical officer. "Unidentified vessels closing in fast." Veltrax's eyes narrowed. "How many?" The officer hesitated. I can't get an exact count." "They're cloaked." The first strike was devastating. Coalition ships in the outer perimeter were obliterated in seconds as human Spectre-class vessels decloaked and unleashed precise, high-energy strikes. The Coalition's advanced shields were useless against the weapons humanity had secretly developed. Enemy ships appearing and disappearing. Vale reported, "We can't lock onto them." Veltrax roared in frustration. "Deploy all fighters. Find them." Swarms of Coalition interceptors launched from the carriers, but they were met with an eerie silence. The human ships had already vanished, leaving only the smoldering wreckage of their targets behind. Inside the Coalition fleet, chaos erupted. Communications were jammed, sensors malfunctioned, and ships collided in their desperation to regroup. Humanity's stealth tactics turned the Coalition's numerical advantage into a liability. On board the Dominion's Pride, Veltrax paced furiously. "Where are they?" he bellowed. Vale stared at his screen, his normally calm demeanor cracking. "They're everywhere and nowhere, Commander. They're striking from blind spots and then vanishing. It's as if they know our every move before we make it." Veltrax slammed his clawed hand onto the console. "This is impossible. They're just humans." In the heart of the chaos, a single transmission broke through the Coalition's scrambled comms. The voice was calm and measured, but it carried a weight that sent chills through the crew of every Coalition ship. "You were warned. Leave our space, or the consequences will worsen." The transmission ended, leaving the Coalition forces in stunned silence. Veltrax snarled, "Cowards, fight us directly." But humanity had no intention of fighting by the Coalition's rules. Back on Earth, Admiral Hale watched the battle unfold through live feeds relayed by her fleet. The Coalition's mighty armada, so arrogant and overconfident, was in complete disarray. Colonel Grant stood beside her, a satisfied smile on his face. "They don't know how to handle us. They've never faced an enemy like this before." Hale nodded. "And they never will. Keep the pressure on. Hit their supply lines next. Make sure they can't regroup." Grant hesitated for a moment. "Do you think they'll retreat?" Hale's expression hardened. "Not yet. Veltrax is too proud. He'll double down." Her gaze turned to the holographic display of Coalition space. "And when he does, we'll be ready." As the remnants of the Coalition fleet limped back to safer territory, whispers spread among the surviving crews. Stories of invisible ships, precise strikes, and the chilling message they had received began to circulate. Fear began to take root, a fear the Coalition had never known before. For the first time, they realized they weren't just fighting humans. They were fighting an unseen enemy that knew their weaknesses better than they knew themselves. The wrath of the Silent Hunters. The Coalition's defeat in Sector Theta 5 was a wound that bled across the galaxy. Every ship that returned told the same tale. Human vessels appeared from nowhere, struck with precision, and vanished into the void. High Commander Veltrax's pride was shattered, but his fury burned brighter than ever. "This isn't over," Veltrax growled, addressing the Coalition Council. His holographic image towered over the assembled leaders. "We'll hunt them down, every last one of them." Ambassador Saren, who had warned of this outcome, folded her arms. "And what will you do, Commander? Send more ships to their destruction. Humanity has shown they're more than capable of outmaneuvering us." Veltrax's glare could have melted steel. "They can't hide forever." But even as he spoke, the Coalition's leaders felt a gnawing doubt. The humans weren't hiding. They were hunting. In the deep recesses of space, a fleet of human stealth vessels gathered. Admiral Catherine Hale stood on the bridge of the Erebus, a massive warship hidden beneath layers of advanced cloaking technology. Her officers waited for her command. "Report," Hale ordered. Colonel Grant stepped forward. "Phase 2 is in place. Admiral, Coalition supply routes are mapped, and our strike teams are ready. We'll cut off their logistics before they even see us coming." Hale nodded. "Good. Let them feel what it means to be outmaneuvered." In Coalition space, supply convoys became the next target. The Iron Vanguard, a cargo ship loaded with fuel and ammunition, traveled along a well-guarded route. It was escorted by 3 frigates, their weapons primed for any sign of an attack. "Keep your eyes sharp," Captain Tilrex of the Iron Vanguard warned his crew. "Humans are like vermin. They strike when you least expect it." But expecting didn't help. A faint ripple in the stars was the only warning they received. A human destroyer, cloaked in its stealth field, materialized behind the convoy. Before the coalition ships could react, a barrage of electromagnetic pulses fried their systems. The frigates tried to regroup, but the destroyer's speed was unmatched. It danced through their defensive fire, delivering crippling blows to each ship's engines. Within minutes, the convoy was disabled, drifting helplessly in space. The human destroyer didn't bother finishing them off. Instead, it launched drones to seize the cargo before disappearing into the void. When the coalition rescue teams arrived, they found only debris and a chilling message left etched into the hull of the Iron Vanguard. "You underestimated us." The attacks escalated. Fuel depots exploded without warning. Communication relays went silent. Starports critical to coalition operations were obliterated by unseen forces. Every strike was precise, every move calculated to cripple the coalition's war machine. Veltrax's frustration grew with each report. "Where are our scouts?" he bellowed during a council meeting. "Why haven't they found the human fleet?" "They've evaded every search party we sent," an officer replied. "It's as if they know our patrol routes before we set them." Veltrax slammed his fist on the table. "Impossible. We have the most advanced technology in the galaxy." Saren leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "Technology is only as good as the minds behind it. The humans are proving they're more resourceful than we ever imagined." In the coalition capital, fear and dissent began to spread. Citizens demanded answers. How could a species they once deemed inferior inflict such devastating losses? Propaganda broadcasts tried to downplay the attacks, but rumors painted a different picture. Stories of human ships appearing like ghosts and leaving destruction in their wake grew more vivid with each retelling. In the dark corners of the capital, whispers of a chilling possibility began to circulate. What if the humans aren't just defending themselves? What if they're preparing for something bigger? On board the Erebus, Admiral Hale watched the chaos unfold through intercepted transmissions. Colonel Grant stood beside her, reviewing the latest reports. "Veltrax is pulling back his fleets to protect their core worlds. Their outer territories are wide open." Hale smirked. "Good. Let him retreat. The deeper he pulls his forces, the more vulnerable his supply lines become." Grant hesitated. "Admiral, do you think they'll ever learn?" Hale's expression darkened. "They'll learn when it's too late. Veltrax and his kind have always underestimated us. They see us as weak, as prey. That's their greatest mistake." She turned to the holographic map of coalition space. "Prepare the next phase. We're not just going to cripple their fleets. We're going to make them fear us." In the void of space, the humans moved like shadows, striking where the coalition was weakest and vanishing without a trace. The galaxy was beginning to understand a harsh truth. The humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were sending a message. And that message was clear. Humanity's line in the sand. High Commander Veltrax stared at the latest battlefield reports in disbelief. The coalition's supply lines were in tatters, fleets scattered, and morale plummeting. Humanity wasn't merely defending its territory. It was dismantling the coalition's war machine piece by piece. "This is unacceptable," Veltrax roared, his voice echoing across the bridge of the Dominion's pride. "How can a species we considered primitive outwit us at every turn?" Vale, his first officer, approached cautiously. "Commander, their tactics are unlike anything we faced. They strike with precision, avoid direct confrontations, and exploit our weaknesses. We can't even track them properly." Veltrax's claws raked across the console. "Then we change our approach. Bring me the best tacticians the coalition has to offer. If brute force won't work, we'll outthink them." But even as he issued his orders, doubts gnawed at his mind. He was no longer certain the coalition could win this war. On board the Erebus, Admiral Catherine Hale reviewed the coalition's response with satisfaction. The enemy was desperate, their movements predictable. "They're scrambling," Colonel Grant said, pointing at the map of coalition fleets. "Veltrax is trying to consolidate his forces, but that's leaving entire sectors unguarded." Hale nodded. "He's panicking." "Good. Desperation makes them reckless." Her gaze hardened as she turned to her officers. "But we can't let up. The coalition must learn that their arrogance has a price. Prepare Task Force Omega for deployment. I want every critical outpost in their core systems neutralized within the next week." "Yes, Admiral," Grant replied. In the coalition's core systems, fear had turned into outright paranoia. On the planet Orith Prime, a vital hub for coalition logistics, alarms blared as human ships appeared in orbit. Civilians scattered as orbital defenses struggled to repel the attack. But humanity's strikes were surgical. Energy grids went offline, supply depots exploded, and key infrastructure was destroyed. The human fleet disappeared just as quickly as it had arrived, leaving behind a burning reminder of their capabilities. The coalition leaders convened in an emergency session. Ambassador Surin addressed the council, her voice sharp with frustration. "We warned you. Humanity is not an enemy to provoke," she said, glaring at Veltrax. Veltrax clenched his fists. "And what do you suggest, Ambassador? Surrender?" Surin's eyes narrowed. "I suggest you recognize the truth. Humanity doesn't want domination. They want respect. But if you continue this war, they'll tear the coalition apart. They've already shown they can." Meanwhile, humanity's true strength was being unveiled. In a hidden facility on Earth, engineers and scientists worked tirelessly on advanced projects. A colossal ship, the Leviathan, was nearing completion. The vessel dwarfed even the coalition's largest carriers, bristling with experimental weapons and defenses. Admiral Hale inspected the ship, her expression unreadable. "This is our line in the sand," she said to Grant. "If the coalition won't back down, the Leviathan will make sure they never forget what happens when you push humanity too far." The coalition's desperation culminated in a bold gambit. Veltrax ordered a full-scale assault on a suspected human base in the Zeta Expanse. Over 300 ships were mobilized, their firepower unmatched. As the coalition fleet arrived, they found an empty star system. No human ships, no base, just silence. Veltrax's comms officer spoke nervously. "Commander, we're detecting a signal. It's human." "Play it," Veltrax commanded. The message was simple, yet chilling. "You've crossed into our territory. Turn back or face the consequences." Veltrax sneered. "Empty threats. They don't have the strength to face us head-on. Advance." But as the fleet moved deeper into the system, the trap was sprung. Human ships decloaked around the coalition fleet, their weapons already firing. The first wave disabled the coalition's flagship, while precision strikes neutralized key vessels. The battle was over before it began. Coalition ships that didn't surrender were destroyed. Survivors were allowed to retreat, carrying a single message back to Veltrax. "This is your last warning." Back on Earth, Admiral Hale watched the aftermath of the Zeta Expanse battle. "They'll never recover from this," Grant said. "The coalition is running out of resources and willpower." Hale remained quiet for a moment, then said, "We're not done yet. They need to understand that humanity isn't just a species to be feared. We're one they should never underestimate again." As the Leviathan prepared for its maiden voyage, the galaxy held its breath. Humanity's wrath had been unleashed, and the coalition was learning that some lines should never be crossed. The unyielding resolve. The galaxy was in turmoil. Coalition worlds once brimming with confidence now whispered in fear. Every star system, no matter how fortified, felt vulnerable to the silent hunters that struck without warning. The coalition's arrogance had been replaced by uncertainty, their unity by dissent. High Commander Veltrax's once mighty fleet was a shadow of its former self. His officers avoided his gaze, their morale crushed under the weight of countless defeats. "Commander, we cannot sustain this war." Vale, his first officer, said cautiously. "Our supply chains are severed, and our allies are abandoning us. Humanity has forced us into a corner." Veltrax's claws dug into the armrests of his command chair. "We are the Coalition. We do not surrender to inferior beings." But even as he spoke, doubt clouded his voice. On Earth, humanity was preparing for the final phase of their counteroffensive. In a massive underground bunker, leaders from various human factions gathered around a holographic map. Admiral Catherine Hale stood at the center, her presence commanding respect. "Our intelligence confirms that Veltrax is consolidating his forces near the core coalition systems," Hale began. "They're betting everything on a last stand." Colonel Grant stepped forward. "Do we engage directly, Admiral, or continue our surgical strikes?" Hale's gaze swept across the room. "We've made our point. The Coalition knows they've underestimated us. Now we show them the cost of their hubris." The room fell silent as Hale activated a display of the Leviathan. The ship's sheer size and power were awe-inspiring, a testament to humanity's resilience and ingenuity. "This will be our spearhead," Hale declared. "The Leviathan will lead our fleet into the heart of Coalition space. We will force their surrender or dismantle their leadership entirely." In Coalition space, cracks in their once unshakable alliance were becoming visible. Smaller member species began pulling their fleets back to defend their own worlds, leaving Veltrax with fewer allies. Ambassador Sirin watched these developments with a mix of satisfaction and unease. She had always advocated for caution in dealing with humanity, but now she feared the Coalition had pushed too far. "We must sue for peace," Sirin told the Council. "Humanity has proven they are not to be trifled with. Continuing this war will only lead to our extinction." Veltrax slammed his fist on the table. "You suggest we bow to them? Never. The Coalition will rise again." Sirin's voice was calm but firm. "Rise from what, Veltrax? Ruin. You've already destroyed our future by underestimating them." The human fleet, led by the Leviathan, moved with purpose. Cloaked vessels scouted ahead, ensuring no ambushes awaited them. On board the Leviathan, Hale addressed her crew. "Today, we bring this war to their doorstep," she said. "The Coalition thought us weak, but we've shown them strength. They thought us scattered, but we've shown unity. This ends here." Her speech was met with thunderous applause. The crew knew the stakes. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for respect, for their place among the stars. As the human fleet approached Coalition Prime, the capital world, the defenders braced for impact. Veltrax had gathered what remained of his forces, a fleet of over 1,000 ships. It was a formidable armada, but it lacked cohesion and morale. The Leviathan emerged from hyperspace, its massive frame casting an ominous shadow over the battlefield. The Coalition fleet opened fire immediately, but their weapons barely scratched the human flagship's advanced shielding. Human ships swarmed the Coalition fleet, their maneuvers precise and devastating. The Leviathan unleashed its experimental weapons, tearing through enemy formations with ease. Veltrax watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated around him. His command ship shook violently as explosions erupted across its hull. "Commander, we must retreat," Vale pleaded. Veltrax's pride refused to yield. "No, we fight to the end." Meanwhile, on the surface of Coalition Prime, panic had set in. Citizens fled as human dropships descended, delivering precision strikes to military installations. Ambassador Sirin stood in the council chamber, watching the chaos unfold. She turned to her colleagues. "This is the end. If we don't surrender now, there won't be a coalition left to save." The battle in orbit reached its climax as the Leviathan destroyed Veltrax's flagship with a single devastating shot. The remaining coalition ships scattered, their will to fight broken. Admiral Hale opened a transmission to the coalition leadership. Her face appeared on every screen across the capital. "This war is over," Hale declared. "Humanity did not seek this conflict, but we will finish it if forced. Surrender now, and we will show mercy. Resist, and you will face extinction." The council chamber was silent. All eyes turned to Veltrax's empty seat, his absence a stark reminder of their defeat. Ambassador Sirin rose. "On behalf of the coalition, I offer our unconditional surrender." Humanity had won, not just through strength, but through resilience and strategy. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with. As the human fleet departed Coalition Prime, the Leviathan leading the way, the message was clear. Humanity would not bow, would not break. And the stars would never forget. A new dawn. The war was over, but the galaxy was far from healed. Coalition Prime lay in ruins, its skies quiet for the first time in weeks. The once mighty Coalition Council sat in a shattered chamber, their heads bowed, their pride reduced to ashes. Humanity had proven itself not only as a species of warriors, but as one deserving respect and caution. Admiral Catherine Hale stood on the bridge of the Leviathan, her gaze fixed on the now distant Coalition capital. The ship hummed with life, its crew working tirelessly, despite the quiet victory. Colonel Grant approached her side. "The Coalition's surrender is official, Admiral. Their remaining fleets have stood down, and reparations are being discussed." Hale nodded but did not smile. "Victory comes with its own burdens, Grant. Now, the galaxy will watch us more closely than ever. We've earned respect, but fear lingers. Fear can unite or destroy." Grant's expression darkened. "Do you think they'll try to retaliate?" Hale turned to face him. "Not immediately, but seeds of vengeance are easily planted in defeat. That's why our next moves must be calculated. This isn't just about humanity's survival anymore. It's about its future." Back on Earth, celebrations erupted in cities across the globe. The victory had united humanity like never before, bridging divides that had lingered for centuries. In a quiet corner of the UN Command Center, President Elena Torres addressed the leaders of Earth. "Today, we stand as equals among the stars," she began, her voice strong yet tempered with caution. "But let us not forget the cost of this war, the lives lost, the homes destroyed. This victory isn't just a triumph of strength. It's a lesson in resilience, unity, and the power of standing together against impossible odds." Her words resonated across the globe, reminding humanity of its hard-won place among the stars. Meanwhile, the remnants of the coalition leadership gathered to assess their future. Ambassador Sirin stood before the council, her tone somber yet determined. "We made mistakes," she said plainly. "We underestimated humanity and paid the price. But this defeat doesn't mark the end of the coalition. It marks a chance to rebuild, to learn." Some council members grumbled in dissent, their pride still wounded. But Sirin's vision was clear. "If we let hatred and vengeance guide us, we'll only repeat our failures. If we want to survive, we must approach humanity with diplomacy, not hostility." Months passed, and slowly the galaxy began to stabilize. Diplomatic envoys were exchanged, trade routes reopened, and tentative peace began to take root. Humanity extended an olive branch, offering to aid in reconstruction efforts for coalition worlds. On board the Leviathan, Hale convened her senior officers. "Our mission isn't over," she said. "We've shown the galaxy what we're capable of, but now we must show them what we stand for. Strength tempered with wisdom, resilience paired with compassion. The universe needs to see that humanity is more than warriors. It's builders, thinkers, and allies." Years later, the galaxy was a different place. The scars of war remained, but so did the lessons. Humanity became a key player in galactic politics, its influence growing steadily. The coalition, though diminished, learned to coexist with its former adversaries. Trade and cooperation replaced war and conflict, fostering an era of fragile but hopeful peace. On Earth, a new generation looked to the stars with wonder, inspired by the resilience of their ancestors. The Leviathan, now a symbol of humanity's rise, was retired to orbit, a reminder of the day the galaxy learned the true strength of humankind. Admiral Hale, now retired, stood on a balcony overlooking the Earth's surface. Colonel Grant, also retired, joined her, handing her a glass of wine. "Do you think the peace will last?" he asked. Hale gazed at the stars, her expression thoughtful. "Peace is never guaranteed, Grant. But if humanity has proven anything, it's that we can adapt, endure, and rise to any challenge. The galaxy knows that now." As they stood in silence, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter. Humanity had carved its place among them, not through conquest, but through unyielding resolve and the hope for a better tomorrow.